As somebody who's notorious for liking bad stuff, I know firsthand the kind of comments people make when I tell them that I like something that is bad. You get weird looks or just outright insults, which they don't make me upset because I've never gotten one that is actually meant to harm. I don't think. It's always just, friends and family messing with me for liking the things that I like. Hi, my name is Mary. I'm 23, and my favorite movies are the Michael Bay Transformers. Can bad art be good? I think, yeah, it sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron. As long as we pinpoint what exactly it means for a piece of art or entertainment or whatever it is to actually be bad or be good, which we will in a second. And by the way, I'm going to use art and entertainment interchangeably just because I find that easiest. I am very good at overlooking the flaws in something for the sake of enjoying the good parts. Sometimes the flaws outweigh the good parts and it's not worth the watch. I'm sure many of you have heard of the channel Cinema Sins, which is a YouTube commentary channel critiquing movies and basically going down a list of every single thing wrong with a specific movie. That's fine. It gets some views. I prefer not to dwell on the negative. Like I said, I can overlook flaws for the sake of the good. I do have a lot of movies and things that I don't enjoy, that I really dislike. So I'm not saying I'm immune to all of it. And sometimes those dislikes are even things that are seen by most people as being good. But again, the question comes down to, what does it mean for something to be good and what does it mean for something to be bad? We first have to establish that and be on the same wavelength before we can actually come to an agreeing conclusion. So, is all art subjective? There is a debate online about whether art is subjective. You see it in YouTube videos, you see it on Reddit forums. I found 2 separate Reddit forums. One was basically saying, does anybody else get annoyed when people say all art is subjective, and then goes on to be a complete thread of people talking about how art is not subjective and it's very objective and there is objective truths that make it good or bad. And then on the other hand, there was another forum that talks about all art is subjective, and it was a thread about people talking about when somebody says that something is their favorite piece of... Actually, I have the quote here. There was a specific comment by Fairy Stories 9 years ago where it says, "You see, the majority of the time when we describe art as being good or bad, we're referring to our own subjective perception of its quality, and we are using our own personal standards of what constitutes quality." So you have one side that says all art is objectively good or bad, and you have another side that says all art is subjectively good or bad. And so if it is subjective, is it really actually ever good, or is it bad, or is it just an existence of something and has to be filtered through a lens of the individual in order to come to a conclusion of whether it's good or bad? Both sides can be relentless, but which is more correct? And I understand both sides. I, at one point in my life, was a firm believer that all art is subjective. And if somebody tried to say, well, this movie wasn't good because of this, this, and this, and I'll be like, that's just your opinion. And looking back on that, I realized at the time I was just throwing out that phrase to cover up the fact that I was intellectually incapable of having those kinds of discussions. I think we do need to be careful when we say art is subjective, because sometimes it can be just a cop-out, and instead of holding people accountable for creating things that have some semblance of effort in them, we give them a slide. Just the popularity of something determine whether something is good? Well, in some cases it can be true, such as Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Percy Jackson series, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, other stuff that's just not coming to my brain right now. These things are all highly praised and are also very popular, deservingly so. But at the same time, 2023 was the year of flops, especially anything trademarked as Disney. And some of those flops, such as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and then also Wish, they flopped hard. People don't like these specific movies for a couple reasons. One, the CGI and animation were outdated. The storytelling was bad. And the things that they promised to deliver were not delivered. The expectations that they set for themselves were not met. And sure, there are probably people out there that like these movies. Maybe even diehards of them, although that's going to be hard to convince me of. But even if they do exist, the lovers of those films are probably as many as the haters of movies like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, because those movies were phenomenal. The storytelling, the animation, every single thing about them was just so gorgeous. But on the other hand, especially in the publishing world, so many terrible things are being published. I blame TikTok in some way. It's got to be TikTok's fault. One of the books that comes to mind is Fourth Wing. TikTok loved this book, and I read it. Maybe it's my subjectivity coming into play, but Fourth Wing was trash. Colleen Hoover is another one. Yeah, no, I don't understand why those kinds of books girls are just ravenous for them. Ravenous. So I think those books are huge evidence to the fact that art is subjective. And also that just because something is popular does not make it automatically good. It makes me think of that quote from the incredibly popular YA book series Twilight, specifically the book New Moon. And it goes, "Arrow started to laugh. Ha ha ha. He chuckled." Iconic. I love that. Viewers' perception will heavily impact whether or not somebody likes something. We are all individuals with our individual biases. But isn't there a level of technique that has to be acknowledged? So for instance, curated entertainment. And by curated, I mean it's meant to be profited off of, or it's made for the sake of other people to see it. When it comes to writing or filmmaking, such as directing and whatnot, creating music, painting, sculpting, drawing, dance even, all of these things are forms of art that can also be entertainment because they're used as a form of self-expression from people, right? And self-expression oftentimes creates connectivity between people. There's a way we communicate through art that draws people to it. And it's an egregious thought to consider judging somebody's form of self-expression, isn't it? I mean, that's like judging them as a person. Not necessarily, Your Honor. When a movie or a musical makes it to the silver screen, you better believe that the things in that movie are to a specific standard or nobody is going to make money. If the lighting is not to standard, or the audio, or the storytelling, or whatever it may be, even the acting, no one's going to make money because nobody is going to want to spend money on something that is subpar. It might as well be a YouTube video from 2009. Same with books. If the dialogue is cringy and the plot has a bunch of holes and the grammar is not even close to being stylistic and is just outright bad, nobody ever should be publishing your manuscript. Keyword there being should, because listen, 2023 was the year of flop after flop after flop, and I don't understand why so many bad pieces of entertainment are being greenlit. I really don't. Like, if you know the reasons, please comment it down below because I need you to save us from this nightmare. But that's a whole nother discussion. There is a 3-act or 4-act or 7-act formula to apply to writing to make your story more palatable to consumers. There is a music theory and a color theory that, when done correctly, can boost your art. There are objectively attractive things that are proven to improve things. So if we're going to come to the same conclusion about what makes art good or bad, I suppose we have to look at it from a bit of a philosophical sense. So I'm going to introduce you to a book called Introduction to Philosophy. And in it, there is a chapter dedicated to what makes beauty objective or subjective. In the book, Christopher Schneck, I can't say his name without making it sound like that, talks about aesthetics and the objectivity and subjectivity in beauty and art. And in that, to summarize, he describes aesthetics as the study of beauty. Many people throughout history used this word in different ways. In the 1800s were born the romantics of beauty. The word aesthetics is actually derived from this time period. The term aesthetics was chosen for the philosophy of art to emphasize that not all knowledge is scientific or factual, but there are independent ways of knowing the world through experience of art. The Romantic period was a response to the scientific, objective view of beauty that the ancient Greek philosophers held. In this era of science, which is also known as the Enlightenment period, the ancient Greeks considered beauty to be directly found in the order or proportions of something. You've heard of the golden ratio, right? Especially the golden ratio of the face. The idea that a perfectly mathematical ratio of all of the features on your face, when aligned correctly, can create the most beautiful face. Lopsided faces and crooked noses are not beautiful because they fall outside of that ratio. That's a concept rooted in the Enlightenment period. The more rational something was, the more beautiful it was. In this way, beauty was an aspect of the truth of the thing under consideration. This is very different from the romantic idea of beauty, that beautiful things make you feel their beauty. They are inexact and messy, and they often depend on our own subjective experience. The Romantics stressed non-scientific qualities of art, like feeling and creativity. The Enlightenment thinkers stressed the proportion, order, and complexity of artwork as aspects of its technical and mathematical perfection. For the objective view, aspects of the form of the thing are what matter most, such as order and proportion. And for the subjective view, aspects of the content are what matter most. How it makes us feel. It's always form versus content. If you prefer to focus on the form of a content, how it's structured, or the technical aspects, then you're going to find that there is objectivity in art, or you might believe that art is objective. And vice versa, if you go into something looking for how it can affect you or what it can give you through its content, if you're looking at the messaging or how it makes you feel, then you are focused on the content of it, and thus will find subjectivity in everything. Form is the paint that we use. Content is the image that we create using the paint. So beauty found in the perfect form, complexity, and order of something exists outside of the individual and is thus a natural beauty of the universe, not determined by man. Beauty found in the content or the taste or pleasure or entertainment of something depends on the individual to interpret it, and thus is not found naturally in the world and is determined by man. It's communicable in a way that makes us want to share our experiences with others. Maybe a TV show is your favorite because you see yourself in a part of it. It reflects you or it represents you. It brings you joy or makes you laugh, or it speaks to you on a personal level. But if we're going to look at all of the facts and all of the pieces working together, both exist at the same time, like two sides of a coin. So if one is good and one is bad, then something, a piece of art, can be both good and bad at the same time. And maybe you'll have people, of course, who are like, it can't be good if some of the parts are bad. That means that as a whole, it is a bad piece of art. I suppose you could say that. But then it comes down to, are we ever going to agree on what kind of content makes something good? We can agree objectively that there are technical things you can do that make something good or bad. The form of something can be objectively good. But if we're talking about the subjective standpoint of content, we would all have to agree that the subjective side of something is good in order for any piece of art to be considered entirely good. So it's just not a very good argument to say both the subjective and objective have to be good in order for a piece of art to be good. Anyway, now that we've determined that there is both objectivity and subjectivity in art, the only thing that really matters to the discussion now is the question, does one matter more than the other? Does the objectivity in a movie hold more weight than subjectivity? And I guess if you're making a movie to be liked by the mass population, yes, it does matter more to have an objectively good movie. But if you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, your opinion is not more valid about a certain work of art or a piece of entertainment just because you focus on the objective more than the subjective, and the person you're talking to might like something that is objectively bad, but their opinion is that it's good because they like the subjective content in it. I don't think either opinion is necessarily higher than the other. So then what are the standards of objectivity in art? Well, there's audio, lighting, storytelling, acting, grammar, to name a few. Things can break these rules, obviously. Christopher Nolan comes to mind for audio because he tends to have bad audio in his movies, but it's an intentional choice. Said it was like an artistic choice or something once, which is okay. That's fine. You can do what you want. Nobody is going to deny that he is one of the greatest filmmakers in the world at present day. So I'm not going to hold that against him. Also, the lighting in movies, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but the current lighting situation in film sucks. I'm sick and tired of watching a movie set in the dark and not being able to see a dang thing, okay? Just because your movie takes place at night or on a dark boat or in a dark mansion or is supposed to have a moody atmosphere does not mean that we as the viewer should not be able to see what's freaking happening, okay? Also, can we bring some of the color palettes up? Like Barbie was beautiful, but it was supposed to be plastic. It was supposed to be hyperpigmented because that's what Barbie is. The Dark Knight trilogy. You remember those movies? The old Batman movies, the ones that are really good? Yeah. They take place in very dark, moody atmospheres, but I can still see whatever the heck is going on. I don't have to squint and cover my eyes in an already dark theater to see what's happening. Ugh. And then I guess there's also like this invisible standard that the audience isn't really supposed to know about, which is, does this piece of art accurately reflect what the creator intended it to be? And if not, then maybe it's bad in terms of the what it was intended to be, but that doesn't necessarily impact what the individual viewer thinks of it, because we don't really know about that. You can have personal standards for something, which I am going to enlighten you on my personal standards at the end of the video, so stick around for that. So my taste is different than your taste, and my taste I can think is the top dog. I have the best taste in the world, but that is always going to be subjective because it is entirely dependent on our upbringing and our education. It is a social construct and it is based on experiences, so it can never be objective. There really isn't much to say on the standards of the content of a piece of art, because it is, as I have said 10 bajillion thousand times today, it is subjective. There is some debate, I suppose, on bad messaging, like when something depicts immorality as okay, but that's just a whole nother very controversial, murky debate on the philosophy of morals and whether morals are objective, and there are objective morals. People, it's just very not something I want to get into right now. So we're just gonna stick with the assumption that there really are no standards on content other than the personal standards. But as far as if a movie has alien robots fighting other alien robots, and whether or not that is to your taste, that is just subjective. And the reason why content is so subjective is because we all have different reasons for consuming art. It serves everyone in different ways. You can go watch a movie looking to just be entertained by the existence of it, like just take it for what it is. Other people go into it looking for something. They go into it having an expectation already set. And so if that expectation isn't met, then they're not going to enjoy it. Or you could go into it looking to be represented, and if you don't see yourself represented in it, then maybe you won't like it. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you don't want to see yourself in it. You want it to be a form of escapism. I don't know. People have all sorts of different reasons for liking and consuming art. It is subjective to the individual. That is what makes it very hard to set standards on it. And now we're gonna circle back to the first question I asked. Can you like something even if it isn't good? Yes, I think we've determined that. And that's okay. It's okay to like something that isn't perfect. None of us are perfect. Very, 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 very rarely are you going to find a piece of art, especially a movie or a book, that is 100% perfect. Everything is going to have flaws because it's made by flawed human beings. We are not perfect. We are not all-knowing. We are going to create things that reflect that. So it's okay to like things that aren't perfect. It's not impossible to believe, even if you don't understand why and you don't agree, that someone may like something that you dislike because they are expecting something different out of it. And you're also not obligated to tell them that they're wrong or that something they like is bad. Just so you know, you can, especially online, like if you ever look at the comments of something, it's okay to just scroll. It's okay to not have to, say, yeah, you're wrong. You're stupid. You can just let people live their lives blissfully in a little corner where their opinions can blossom. You don't have to burst their bubble just because you disagree. At the same time, oh my gosh, it is very, very irritating when somebody defends a movie as the pinnacle standard or the pinnacle of art when it has glaring flaws. If you do this, I will automatically assume that you are a child and have the reasoning capabilities of a child. I like plenty of bad things, but I'm self-aware enough to recognize the flaws. I don't need to deceive myself into liking something because I'm insecure. I can like something in spite of its flaws, and it won't change how I view it. Alright, I'm glad you've stuck around this long. We are now going to get into my own standards for what I like to entertain myself with. They are entirely subjective, and if you want to click away from the video now, go ahead and do that. I won't be mad. If you want to stick around and try to roast me in the comments for what I'm about to say, you can try, but I've prepared for your flaming arrows and have hired a bunch of lackeys to monitor the comments and delete them. Okay? I'm just kidding. You may agree with the points that I've come up with for my own subjective view. I use this to determine whether I think something is good or bad based on patterns. I didn't come up with this and then form my view of art around it. I formed this outline around my already established view of art. So you may agree with me, you may not. You may agree with a couple points and not all of them. That's okay. When it comes to my taste, the very first thing that I look for in any kind of art is the novelty of it. Obviously, people love the novel. When something possesses a novelty about it, I beat it into the ground until it is trampled and no longer resembles the thing that drew me to it in the first place. And then it's on to the next novel thing. I am constantly searching for novelty everywhere. If something is not, and these are the points I've come up with to determine what I view as novel, original, creative, or daring, count me out. The novelty of something. And I think that's the least controversial thing on this list because everybody loves originality. Everybody loves to find something new. I'm sure all of you can name a time when you watched a movie and after it ended, it glued you to the seat by the sheer existence of it. Marvel, in its early days, was completely novel. Superhero movies were just beginning to bud on a grand scale, and multi-movie crossovers had never really been done, especially on big budget. So it was definitely novel. In fact, people still haven't been able to replicate its fame, even though they have tried. R.I.P. Marvel. And I guess there's a dark side to novelty too, such as if something is novel in a bad way, like almost infamous. But even in those cases, most people will still be able to appreciate it for the sheer genius of coming up with something original. With an oversaturated market, something new is always refreshing. And the novel is hard to harness for that very reason. It's easy to rip off somebody else's work. It's a lot harder to grind away in the recesses of your own mind for something completely new, or at the very least distinct enough to call itself novel, fangs and all. I'll read a book that has common, overdone tropes any day if they're subverted in an interesting way. Then we have the nostalgic. Everyone is nostalgic for something, but nostalgia is personalized to the individual. Ironically, it's probably the polar opposite of novel. It's the very thing you keep going back to over and over again because of the feeling that it gives you, joy and comfort. And if you do it just one last time, maybe you might be able to grasp it forever. Things I describe nostalgia with are the childlike and the homely. Saturday morning cartoons, birthday cake, swimming in the pool with your friends on a sunny day, board games, silly bands, climbing trees, the DS, Tamagotchi, GameCube, and Wii, Christmas movies, the coziness of your bed, a fireplace with a warm cup of tea and your favorite book, or a TV show that you've seen a million times, laughter over your favorite meal, stroking your cat, or building a fort with the couch cushions, childlike faith and a hope of a safe world. Wholesome things. Comforting things. One of my favorite things to do is discuss the things that I grew up with, whether it's like cartoons or whatever, with my brother, because we're twins, so we literally grew up in the same landscape together. We experienced the same things at the same time. Like, we'll go over old cartoon theme songs or Saturday morning shows, and we'll talk about their intros. And I just love the feeling that gives me. I love dwelling on the nostalgic. And if a piece of art can bring me that same feeling that I get from those moments with my brother, count me in, buddy. And then we have the contrasting. I just love things that contrast. I love things that shouldn't work together and yet do, or they don't make sense, or you would never expect them to be seen on the same screen. There's a music video editor named Jordan Orm who I really like. And in almost every single video, he talks about how contrast creates focus. And it's very true. It can be especially valuable when applied to the visual aspect of something. Obviously, if I'm watching a movie or listening to a song that has some weird contrast to its messaging or the content of it, I will be intrigued. Maybe it's a goth that listens to metal music but has the most bubbly, positive, joyous, Jesus-loving personality, or vice versa. I just love things that shouldn't make sense, yet do. Sad versus happy, dark versus light, peace versus chaos, perfect versus imperfect. And that's just the popular ones. When it comes to the themes of a story, there are so many ways in which it can contrast itself. especially if those two things are interwoven so masterfully that it makes both of them shine equally. Star Wars is an example of light versus dark, which speaks for itself. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is a phenomenal movie, and I think that balances sad versus happy very well, or even serious versus unserious. I think it's just works really well together. The Hunger Games is an example of peace versus chaos. And then The Perfect and the Imperfect, the Bible. I've come to learn to expect great things from the simplest of dualities. And then we also have the absurd, which I just want to say right now means so much to me. This one is probably the least popular. Like, most people probably aren't going to have this in something where it's like, man, if something's absurd, I'm going to love it more. I just love anything the slightest bit weird, funky, or bizarre. Art is the breeding ground for oddities, honestly. But those things are usually shoved into a corner as a niche, or maybe reserved for the truest connoisseurs of art. We have gotten more of it in recent years. I think people are just really trying to push the boundaries, and Everything Everywhere All at Once is an example of that. I never actually saw it or read it, but it won a lot of Oscars, so I'm pretty sure it was well received. I am a Courage the Cowardly Dog lover. That was my favorite Cartoon Network show. That's a weird show. That is a weird one. Things you don't expect. Things that cause confusion. Things that shock or are a little bit uncanny. Don't mistake this for novelty, although there are similarities. There are differences in my mind. They're set apart. The novel doesn't necessarily confuse you. The novel is just a vague sense of, wow, I've never seen or experienced something like this before. Crazy. Whereas the absurd is, I don't know what the heck I just watched. That was so weird. And every single scene is unexpected. Guardians of the Galaxy, again, fits this point. It's absurd to the utmost degree, with a talking raccoon and a tree that says only one sentence, to the surprisingly rich humor at unexpected times and plot points that make you feel like you are in a fever dream. It's all beautifully woven together. Nonetheless, it is very out there in concept. It's not something you see typically. I also really like Howl's Moving Castle, both the book and the movie. The movie, granted, is less chaotic than the book. I think the book has a bit more of a wild, frantic feel about it, whereas the movie is more peaceful and poetic. But they're both good, and both of them are strange. I mean, Howl's Moving Castle has a talking fire demon, a castle that walks, an 18-year-old hag, a portal to Wales, and a sentient turnip. It's constantly bouncing between points of wonder and intrigue. If a movie can weave all four of these points together in a way that makes them all shine and work beautifully, that will be the best piece of art ever created, in my eyes. But most things won't have all four. Some will have one or two, and that's okay. It only needs one or two to be successful. Even if the dialogue is cringy, or it's poorly directed, or the plot line has a bunch of holes in it. Transformers. If it has one of these points, and these points are done extremely well, I'll probably still like it. Oh, another point that I didn't add, that I came up with after the fact, is the exciting. And unlike the other 4 points, which can stand on their own, this one has to be paired with one of the other 4 points. Like, it can't just be an exciting movie. It has to be an exciting movie that's novel, or an exciting book that's absurd. Anything cinematic, like cinematic crescendos and soundtrack, or a perfectly placed to drop after a brilliant build that makes you feel like your feet are dangling off of a roller coaster. I love that feeling, and it's so addictive. So there's that. So if we're going to talk about my favorite things now, after just giving you a rundown of what makes something good in my eyes, like I said, I love the Transformer movies. I am the biggest alien robot simp. I've marathoned the first 5 movies probably 5 times in the last 2 years. I just love them so much. I love them. I don't like the second one very much, even though it has Sideswipe in it, and I like Sideswipe. And then I gotta get through these quick because this video is too long and I don't have the kind of equipment to edit a long video. The TMNT movies, also by Michael Bay, the live action ones, when these first came out back in 2014, was not a fan because I did not like how the turtles looked. But then I realized they're humanoid turtle ninjas. They're gonna look weird. And honestly, for what they were working with, they did pretty good at it. I grew up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 2003 show. I love the Turtles. So those movies are just like, they're feeding my inner child. I also like Jar Jar Binks. Sorry, I know people hate him. He's controversial. I will always think he is funny. I have loved him since I was a very little child. And you're not going to be able to change that for me, okay? I'm sorry. Fairy Tail, which is one of the most hated animes in the world. I mean, there's a lot of flaws in it. I don't recommend it to people, but I grew up on this. I started watching this when I was like 12 or 13. It makes me cry. I put off watching the last few episodes for a year because I knew I would sob. When that Snow Fairy song came on in the last episode, I was bawling my eyes out. This show just means so much to me. It's absurd. It's an anime. Most animes are absurd. Take my other favorite animes, for instance. You're on High School Host Club. That's freaking weird. That is a bizarre anime. It's Sergeant Frog. Not one of my favorites, but a nostalgic one. And I will always laugh at it. I also like weird kid music. I did watch My Little Pony when I was like 15, mainly because it had a Doctor Who reference in it, and I was like, oh, this reference is Doctor Who, so I watched the entire show to get the Doctor Who reference, and I actually realized I kind of liked the show. But that being said, I did listen to My Little Pony fan songs, like Pinky's Brew, Nightmare Night, and then that got me into the Living Tombstone and the Wooden Toaster, and so that got me into Five Nights at Freddy's fan songs. And then also I loved Nightcore, and that's just a bunch of weird kid music, okay? Courage the Cowardly Dog, as I already mentioned. I really loved the Flying Monkeys in The Wizard of Oz. That was my favorite part of The Wizard of Oz. Cats, the musical, not the movie. Don't get it twisted. I never watched the movie. I will never watch the movie. But the old musical, a lot of people don't like that. It's kind of controversial. It's nostalgic for me. I also just really love Cats, and the music is phenomenal. And then last but not least, candy corn. Candy corn's my favorite candy. I got a 2.5 pound bag of it for Christmas. And I got this for my birthday last year. Just a big fan of things that people don't necessarily like. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm like that. Maybe it's because I want to set myself apart from people. Or maybe it's just because I'm going through things so fast that I will inevitably end up at weird cross sections where both options are questionable. Yeah, that's basically where I'm going to end the video. Some things I'm not a huge fan of are action movies because I find them bland and repetitive and there's really nothing new about them. Coming of age movies, country music, yeah, there's just nothing really exceptional about any of those things to me. So that's where I'm going to end the video. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you sticking around. This is the longest video I've ever made. I made this entire video just to justify my questionable interests.